welcome to the Unknown Webcast. This is just a bit of a trigger warning for those who believe words are more injurious than sticks and stones. I really am so conservative I can't turn left even when I'm driving. In addition to giving trigger warnings to our viewers, Ron Hensel and I both drink coffee for your protection. This week, Dr. Corey Miller joins us to consider the third revolution and the scandal of the evangelical mind. My name is Don Vino. I'm president of Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. in Wonder Lake, Illinois, which produces the Unknown Webcast. And our senior researcher is Ron Hensel, who will introduce the sponsors of today's webcast. And here is Ronnie Baby.
Greetings from sunny Florida, where the palm tree came out, saw its shadow, and it was totally black.
And it is completely dark. How about that? How you like that better?
That's much better, right?
The sun came up. We're good.
All we had was a shadow, but now the palm tree saw its shadow, and now we have 12 more months of summer. Our sponsors for this edition of the Unknown Webcast is the Grievance Industrial Complex, because things are never bad enough already. The Grievance Industrial Complex. Our regular legal disclaimer: our guest on today's webcast, insert name here, that would be Dr. Corey Miller, has no connection whatsoever to any of the satirical content of the Unknown Webcast hereafter referred to as the webcast, although we probably will not mention it again. This satirical content includes any and all commercials, end credits, puns, smart remarks, or anything else that might fall under the definition of satire. In the meantime, Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. bears no liability for or responsibility for anyone's opinions regarding this satirical content. Notice, the opinions expressed on this webcast are ours and should be yours too. If you enjoy it or if it really annoys you, to ensure your continued access, please go to midwestoutreach.org, click the yellow donate button, and contribute as you feel led. And as you do, never fear, this webcast is Y2K compliant. And don't forget to subscribe to us on your favorite video channels. And now our very, very, very special guest, Dr. Corey Miller. Waiting for you. Well, I would like to graduate from fake applause to AI applause. Is that out there anyway? Maybe I can get a video. And maybe I can actually put people we know in the audience, like we could have Marcia.
Oh, that could be fun. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet you one day I'll be able to do that. Probably next week at the rate.
Kind of like the Beatles did with the Sgt. Pepper's cover.
Yeah. In fact, those are people who we know, but they were dead, most of them.
Yeah,
in fact,
true. Yeah,
maybe all of them. So, greetings. Oh,
greetings and salutations.
I need to unmute Dr. Miller here. He's, Dr. Miller needs to unmute himself. Yeah, you got to unmute yourself.
It is, and he's got to unmute his microphone so we can. There he is.
I'm here, and I thank you for inviting me on your program to discuss the hot
topic.
Well,
what's even more strange is that you've been here with us a few times and you still come back. So we appreciate that. So. And Corey is going to be one of the plenary speakers at our Engage 2025 conference. And we're going to look at a short promo of that. And so you still have time. You can register. There's no cost to register. We do ask that you register, however, so we can have a nice little name tag for you and that sort of thing. We're also going to have meals there, dinner on Friday and lunch on Saturday. Those you do have to pay for in advance if possible. So
can I be a contrarian here?
I don't care.
On the contrary. Can I ask the kind of question that'll make you glad I'm not going to show up at this conference? When I saw why we lost the culture wars flash by me, just a thought popped into my head here. what if we, like, I want to say, who's we, white man? What if we didn't lose the culture wars? What if nominal Christianity lost it? What if we never really, what if evangelicalism, what if the true gospel never really was at the
Well,
head of the culture?
that is a really great question, and Donald Williams will be addressing that. I would say a couple of things, and then Corey can weigh in because, in a sense, we're kind of going in that direction anyway. And that is this. In fact, I've just been doing a talk like this in churches recently. Is that the church transformed civilization after it was came into existence in the first century over a
Mhm.
300-year period to give us what is now Western culture. Even atheists are now arguing that we need to protect Christianity because they like the morals and ethics in it. Until the last 30 years or so, the morals and ethics that were the guardrails for culture for Western society came from Christianity, even though most of those who adhered to them were not Christians. That is no longer the case. Now, morals and ethics are largely out of circulation. We don't really need them. We can make up our own morals and ethics. 92% of culture are syncretist. Only 4% of culture currently hold a biblical worldview. So, has the culture wars been lost? Yeah, maybe. Can we make a difference in our areas? I think. And so, Corey, weigh in on that. What do you think?
Weigh in. I think Don did a good job responding. What do you say?
Well, first, I appreciate you guys can be satirical and humorous, and at the same time address serious content issues that deal with serious societal issues and human lives. Um, Rod Dreher has said, "We lost the cultural war. It's over. Now we need to hunker down, essentially go into our bomb shelters, train our families, and when all the fallout from the nuclear age up above ravages the surface of the earth, then we can come back up and restart civilization." I think that is nonsense. I think part of the problem why we are here is um, because of the scandal of the evangelical mind.
Yeah.
Well, and how much do those bomb shelters cost is another thing.
Especially
You know,
ones in space. That's kind of, yeah.
yeah. The so you're I was on the campus. I was working on the campus of Wheaton College when that book came out, and I was talking to Don about it. I was kind of vaguely aware. I kind of knew it was coming out, but I didn't know that Noel was putting on a question and answer seminar in one of the auditoriums on campus. That this particular morning when I showed up to lunch, I was working. I probably couldn't have gone to listen to it anyways. Where the book was like fresh out on the market, and he was taking Q&A from the audience, and there were a lot of faculty in there. And by the time I got to lunch, I could tell a lot of them weren't happy with the book. The first sentence, the problem with the evangelical mind is that there isn't much of an evangelical mind. And here were men and women who had devoted the greater part of their lives to developing their evangelical minds and to transmitting that knowledge to as many people as they could. So they kind of took umbrage. Not everybody. I mean, there were some who, wanted to think it over. Maybe some already agreed. I don't know. But there were some voices that I heard that morning or that afternoon over lunch, sitting at a faculty table. Um, so what do you think? I mean, are you basically in agreement with his thesis or what?
Well, I think we've taken a pounding, that's for sure. But uh, he's largely correct. Bertrand Russell, the famous atheist, is alleged to have said most Christians would rather die. In fact, they do. Ouch. I was at a men's prayer breakfast this morning where there's some worship, there's some praying, there's some reading, and then breakfast together. And during the reading, one sentence captured me, and that is that most of education has taken an intellectual stance, but Christian education should be more spiritual and practical. At which time I just went like this, and I was aghast because no, that's not right at all. The Shemot in Deuteronomy chapter 6 says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one," and then it talks about loving the Lord your God with all your heart, your strength, and your soul. And Jesus modified that in Matthew 22:37 to include mind. It's not an invitation. Being an empty mind is not a badge of honor in Christianity. The menace of mindless Christianity has got to go. And so Mark Knoll's thesis 30 years ago, almost this month, was correct that we have scandalized ourselves by this. We excommunicated the life of the mind at some point and preferred to focus more on the hands of Christ and the heart of Christ, but at the expense of Christ. We are the ones who've largely founded the universities.
Right.
Now, not entirely did we certainly didn't found education. But in April, I'll be taking a group over to Europe, and we will trace the history of the development of Western civilization and the Greeks and the Romans and the Christian influences there. And we will go to Plato's Academy, academia, which amounts to basically a swing set and a grass yard now. We'll go over to Aristotle's Lyceum. Did my dissertation in part on Aristotle. And then we'll go over to Paul's area in Corinth and look at Mars Hill, where he philosophized. And I pointed out this morning that Paul spent 2 years at the school of Tyrannus. He was virtually an adjunct professor there for 2 years, lecturing in something that would have been more of a classroom style. The man who wrote 13 out of 27 of the books of the New Testament was highly educated, and he's not juxtaposing revelation against rationality, but in fact, we Christians think that the ground of rationality is ground in the mind of God. We begin with a worldview that starts with mind, not matter. It's the materialist who has a problem trying to explain consciousness. And one philosopher of mind at Brown University, Jaegwon Kim, said in a book that we may be in for Descartes' revenge. What does that mean? Well, we're coming back to substance dualism. Maybe it's true. Maybe there is a mind and we're not just brains and central nervous systems. And I think he's right about that we have a soul that has capacities of mind, will, and emotion, and so forth. The Christians know that, but for some reason, being inconsistent with the first 2,000 years of Christendom, we decided to excommunicate that member of the Trinity, the mind. And we've now walked around headless for far too long, and we've paid an exorbitant price for it. We founded the universities. The Puritans, before they almost had time to build their own house and a laboratory or a bathroom, they built Harvard University. And a lot of people don't realize that. We were the ones who launched those, just like we did Cambridge and Oxford and Bologna and Paris in Europe and so forth, just like we did with the Carolingian revolutions. And we came up with the, trivium and quadrivium, mathematics, geometry, rhetoric, logic. That was Christians that did that. So this stuff that we're seeing now, it's like, just slightly more than a century ago, we abdicated our role and responsibility in high culture, and we cut our heads off and allowed other people to enter the vacuum and take over the academies. And now we're busy just literally training our children in the way they should go. And when they get older, they get conscripted to work for the other side. And
So,
so we
Yeah.
pay for the apostasy of our own children and
Yeah.
grandchildren when we send them off to university now.
so I guess, for me, the elephant in the room here is the word evangelical. Who are we talking about? As soon as you bring up the Puritans, I'm going, whoa, I'm getting whiplash. Because in the Puritans' day, the word evangelical didn't have the same meaning it did in the 19th, 20th, or 21st centuries,
Sure.
where it became this big tent that included everyone from Pelagians like Finney to, very Reformed, very Lutheran people. And so, I would say, would you be willing to concede that there are some places in what passes for the evangelical world today where the mind is in better shape than others?
Yeah, but unfortunately, what happens in America gets exported to other places, and that used to be
Right. What happens in America doesn't stay in America.
Yeah.
Well, but the same holds true for those parts of I think, let's take the Reformed world, for instance. Would you be willing to concede that there are some bright lights there?
Absolutely. I mean, sometimes in Christian circles, there is the joke that it's the Reformed and Presbyterian that are the mind of Christianity, and the charismatics or Pentecostals that are the heart. Whatever.
So let me tell you a little story. Dr. Peter Lilback, you might have heard of him. He's the president of Westminster in Philadelphia. He took a little trip to Korea. He was invited to speak at a Korean seminary, and he was just astonished at how big this seminary was. Presbyterian Reformed Seminary in Korea. And he was saying, I feel a little intimidated. I don't know why you're asking me to speak here when you've got this nice big seminary with all these faculty and students. And he said, we have like a couple hundred students, and I forget what the size of the faculty was. And you are like several times our size. And they kind of laughed. This laughter went through the seminary. And one of the people who was in the administration, maybe the president, said, Dr. Lilbeck, can I interrupt you for a minute? He says, would everybody here who has been to Westminster Seminary in Philadelphia raise your hands? And it blew Lilbeck away. How many faculty at the seminary were Westminster alum? And so, in other words, a lot of stuff that isn't happening here is happening overseas, and we don't see it yet. And a lot of it came from here. We don't just export TBN. There's a lot of pretty good exports. I'm assuming there are more than I wasn't aware of this until Dr. Lilbeck shared that story when he was visiting our church once. I'd like to think that maybe there are more stories like this. I don't know.
Sure. And to define better evangelical, because in our time, it's probably primarily come to mean a political movement, a political bloc. And simply, it's really primarily Protestant Christian movement that focuses on evangelism, personal conversion, and the authority of the Bible. But again, it's had some real serious heavyweights. For the first 2 centuries in this country, almost all presidents of universities were also members of the clergy, and they were Protestants because it was largely Protestants that founded this country. Coming over from Germany, you had Lutheranism over there, you had Anglicanism, Puritanism in the UK, and so forth, that all came over to the US. And so demographically, it made sense as well. But these people also took seriously literacy. Why? Because they wanted people to be able to read the Bible. And so they tried, wherever missionary Protestantism went, you found a higher literacy rate because they thought about evangelism. They wanted people to read the Bible, to have personal conversion. They thought a lot about the authority of the Bible. Well, a lot has happened since then. And if we went back all the way to, again, the late 1800s, so the early 19th century, at that time, we didn't really have any graduate schools in America. And so, even though we had been around for 200 years, we were busy sending our best and brightest over to Europe,
Mhm.
primarily to Germany. And so, this is what I really want to take people and show them on this trip to Europe, too. Um, when you go to Germany at that time, it's the most educated people in the history of the world by formal education. And we wonder, how in the world did the Germans do what they did in the First and Second World Wars? They were the most educated. That doesn't mean the most godly or humanist in the proper sense,
Right.
Christian humanism. And in Germany at the time, you had biblical higher criticism. You had everything from Darwin and Nietzsche and Freud and Marx. Um, uh, Kant, that ended the Enlightenment period, and we remember him by "You can't know anything about ultimate reality."
Right.
And out of that came Schleiermacher, Friedrich Schleiermacher, who's the father of modern liberal theology, and Hegel, and various other people. And so, when our graduates would come back, because we abdicated our role and responsibility in high culture, we weren't able to marshal much of a fight. And they, by proxy, took over the universities. And that's where Westminster, then we lost Princeton.
Yeah.
So we had to start all over again with Westminster in the Presbyterian
Mhm.
tradition, for example. Brown was Baptist, Rutgers was I think that might have been Anglican, Harvard Congregationalist, Yale, William and Mary, Columbia. They all had their sectarian backgrounds. They went secular only in the sense that, Baptists were now living in the area where Princeton was, and they wanted to offer education for other people than just Presbyterians. So they called it secular university. And the Presbyterians now were down by Brown University, where the Baptists started it. And Brown wanted to be competitive and offer education to the Presbyterians. So they became non sectarian or secular. At that time, it wasn't secular humanism, it was just the opposite of sectarian. In the process, however, those philosophies, and behind every PhD is a doctor of philosophy, right? So even if they've never taken a philosophy class, they're imbibing that German philosophy coming over and integrating into every single field. And this gave us, in the religious realm, liberal Protestantism, and it gave us the social gospel. Well, scientific naturalism essentially took over the universities for the next 100 years or so. And so every department now was busy changing its name from politics, which was always part of ethics for 2,500 years, to political science, or psychology, which literally is the study of the soul, to the Department of Psychological Sciences, where we learn that I am my brain and central nervous system. And besides that, there's probably nothing else there. And so, with the scientism epistemology following on the naturalism of the metaphysics that has now taken over the universities, that's what reigned for 100 years, and it had
Mhm.
a dire impact downstream in our culture.
Mhm.
That was the first revolution. There was another revolution to come, and I can share more
Well,
about that.
I would I basically agree with what you're saying, everything you're saying. I just to fill the picture out a little more, I would point out, and maybe this could be looked at as kind of opening the door in a way to what you've described in terms of German influence.
Mhm.
And that is that by 1800, Harvard was basically a Unitarian school. And by 1806, it was formally so with the election of its first Unitarian president. And I think that helped open the door to, and your screen is doing strange things.
You keep
That'll-
talking, jump off, and I'll jump back on.
Let me try something here.
that opened the door to, let's get a close up. There we go.
Okay.
That opened the door.
No. Can I
I
take
think
him out of the picture for a minute?
It went away the last time it happened.
Why don't you just keep talking?
Yeah, let me keep talking. Okay, and we'll bring him back in.
Nope, still there. Now he's gone. So we'll keep talking. He'll return.
Okay. I hope he can hear what I'm saying. I don't know that he can.
No, he can't. He's signing back in. So pick up where you were at.
Yeah, I would say it could have opened the door. You could look at it as opening the door. In the meantime, in this early part of the 19th century, you had people like Charles Hodge going over to Germany and coming back largely intact theologically. In other words, he by no means became, he started under Schleiermacher, one of the founders of German liberal theology, but did not become a liberal himself. So you have these bright, but overall, he's back. He's back, and he's blinking. Well, let's just put him on. And
we'll continue on. You'll just be a little.
We'll put a label warning epileptics not to look at the screen.
All right, he's still ahead of us, so that's good.
Yeah, he's got ahead. But generally speaking, yeah. By the time you get to the 19th century, I think German theology is largely it almost. Well, I don't know how to calculate the percentage, but it's overwhelming in terms of.
Okay, so I'm more of a layman in here. You both are more formally educated than I, and so we wrote on this, Ron. You and I did a long section in our book on Gothard, kind of tracking through how things have changed down through the generations. And as we came into the 20th century, the church was largely biblically illiterate, which is why you had the fundamentals put together early in the 20th century to remind people here are the fundamental doctrines of the faith. And as that went on, then they started having issues because liberalism was taking such a big foothold.
See, I don't read the fundamentals that way. I mean, their role is educating Christians first time. That might have been the case in many churches, but the way I read it is they're trying to put tools in the hands of pastors and laymen.
I agree.
Because and not so much that they don't know, they don't have the theological arguments, and there were a lot of archaeological arguments presented, and a lot of historical arguments presented that I don't think. I mean, there was.
I agree because again, because the church really wasn't.
Well, they had a lot of Bible knowledge in terms of verses and things. I don't think
for sure.
How to put it together.
Yeah, for sure. They don't know how to put it together. So then, as we follow that down, liberalism is still working hard at taking over. As Corey pointed out, the heart, kind of the social issues, the social gospel, and Machen comes out and goes, well, you might be Christian, you might be religious, but you're not Christian, in his book, which it just went out of my brain.
Christianity and Liberalism.
Yeah, Christianity and Liberalism.
And
Great
here's
book.
Here's a guy who studied in Germany, and he had a crisis of faith when he was over there, unlike Hodge, who apparently didn't. But, he could have come back a liberal very easily, but the Lord intervened. So.
Yeah. So then we get in around 47, where you had a split between the fundamentalists and the evangelicals. That's where that kind of stuff happened. And I contend that at that point, evangelicals basically said, I will call you Christian to the liberals if you will call me smart. And so at that point, we start seeing a transition where evangelicals are more concerned about being accepted by the intellectual establishment than they are about holding firm for the faith. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's kind of how I see it. Now, before I turn it over to one of you, it is time to hear from our sponsor.
Yeah, because, recently in an emergency meeting at the Toxico Corporation, project lead Stu said, these protests are delaying our project and killing our bottom line. Foreman Larry said, all this over a few billion dead fish. PR spokesperson Pam said, yeah, how can we compete? How can we show people that we're the real victims here? Across town, a hedge fund manager consults with his lawyer. I feel so left out of the culture wars. I can't afford to be left behind. Where do I find the right victim status to bring me the professional success I'm looking for? Meanwhile, Phil is meeting with his career counselor. They say I don't have enough intersectionality on my resume. Should I consider gender reassignment surgery to boost my job prospects? Now there's a solution for all these problems: the grievance industrial complex. The grievance industrial complex is the premier manufacturer and recycler of fine grievance products. They provide grievances customized for your political, economic, and social goals, and they work closely with you throughout the design and implementation process to ensure your satisfaction. And all their products come with their exclusive, patented, high moral ground, which includes victim status, identity politics tactics, flawless far left ideology, and so much more. And for a limited time, free, the Total Morons Guide to Playing the Victim Card for Terrorists. This chapter chapter on why the founding fathers were fascists is worth the entire price of the book, says Dr. S.J.W. Jones. When your success depends on the demerits of others, real or imagined, always call the grievance industrial complex, because things are never bad enough already.
And there you go.
There you go. I think that isn't that commercial becoming kind of dated now? I mean,
Well, yeah,
I
it's
made it a
getting
few years
dated.
ago.
We got to make some new ones, but
Well, let's go back to Dr. Miller here.
okay.
So yeah, I was just saying, part of what caused the first revolution was what was going on in terms of the higher education, getting the ideology transferred over the Atlantic from Germany to the US. The universities were in transition at the time, becoming secular, not sectarian. They were still sacred, but they were secular sacred. In other words, they weren't denominational. But happening in the broad culture, you had the Second Great Awakening, you had people like Charles Finney, the father of old revivalism. Everything was about the emotions, conversions. Again, evangelicalism, concerned about personal conversion, about evangelism. These revivals were in the burned out district up in New England, right where the Jehovah's Witnesses started, right where Mormonism started, right around that time period. By the time he died, you get D.L. Moody, who's a generation behind him, but spoke at Yale University and other places. Well, Moody had a famous statement: "Don't polish the brass on a sinking ship." In other words, just get the souls off. And so you might imagine Titanic, the movie Titanic, or the ship Titanic. Why are you trying to save the chairs or the trumpets or anything else? They're all going to go to the bottom of the ocean. You need to live. Just get the souls off board. And that's what a lot of people's focus was, is forget about long-term investment. Forget about the life of the mind. Just go for the heart. Go for the emotions. Go for quick conversions as well. Conviction, whatever that is in terms of rational deliberation. Just go for the decisions for Christ. Get 100,000 people to come to Christ, right? That was all happening at the time. So by the time the universities were taken over, it was a 50-year battle. The dust was settling in 1930. Well, at that time, something else was happening in Germany, and it was this little mustache guy was getting ready to come.
Mr. Charlie Chaplin mustache.
Yeah, and so this is, Germany influence 2.0 now for the universities. And so, there was a fight interior to Germany about which socialism ought to win the day. Right. Is it national socialism or global socialism? That is, the national socialism that likes blonde hair and blue eyes with the little mustache guy, or global socialism along with Karl Marx. Well, in 1933, even though the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory, like critical race theory, critical gender theory, critical queer theory, critical pedagogy, critical fat studies, anything that critical whatever that's not critical thinking is Marxism.
Well
critical
put.
critical
And
coffee studies.
critical coffee, it's going to be bad. But this whole cottage industry of critical, this comes from Marx. And originally, there's some Kant and Nietzsche in there too, about the critique of pure reason and practical agnosticism. And there's other things going on there, put it that way. But the the new Marxist movement had begun at the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory in Frankfurt, Germany. Most of those leaders were Jewish and they were Marxists, atheists, which was essential according to Lenin for Marxism. And they wanted a revolution. And Marx and Lenin both looked at the French Revolution and salivated. They thought that was ideal. They talked about the guillotine. They talked about allowing nominal religion to exist for a time. It'll shed its skin like a snake does once everybody gets a redistribution of wealth, and we no longer need religion to get through this tough, rough world. It's the opium of the masses. Well, they didn't win. The Germans won, and the Marxists had to hightail it out of there. Where did they go? Columbia University, Brandeis University, UCLA, and other places. So right when the dust was settling in the US, a new ideological revolution was just getting underway. By the time the Germans get defeated in World War II, and the globalists put their hands in the air and said, "Yes, our only opposition is gone. We've now got Russia. Look what's going on over there." And quickly they had to hurry and get behind the what was the little camera that took the picture of the cheating couple the other day? That's all over the net.
What is it? The kiss cam?
Yeah, yeah. And they were embarrassed, and they're like, "Oh my goodness, what Stalin did, Nikita Khrushchev told us actually happened." Socialism's never really been tried. It's not there in Russia. It's Mao. Mao, if he can't do it, no one can. Mao's the man. And so they looked to China and they went, "Oh my goodness, not China. Oh, who cares? It's postmodernism." And so you get the postmodernists in France, the founders of it, Lyotard, Derrida, and the like, all of these guys, for the first and second generation, these guys were all not relativists like you would think Marxism or like postmodernism is, but Foucault and others. They were all uber left. They were part of the new left. Why? They were all members of the French Communist Party or sympathizers with it. And so all of these guys, you might look at them as like the Vichy government that took over in France. And you've got Gramsci that never got out of prison, but his works got mediated by a Marxist professor at Notre Dame, who happens to be the father of Mayor Pete Buttigieg. All of this together, this is an amalgam now of postmodern cultural Marxism. It all came to America. They all started teaching in the best and brightest American universities. And by the time you get to the 90s, when Mark Knoll wrote that book, the left to right ratio of professors was 2.3 to 1. Something triggered it, and it was like Bitcoin going through the roof, this massive mutual fund going all the way up to now, they're all Democrat politically, which often means secular association, maybe humanist, maybe atheist, maybe agnostic. But Yale University last month announced that 97% of its faculty that gave campaign contributions gave them to Biden. Harvard was 96%, in their previous statistics. So these are almost 100%, completely the opposite of where they were when the country was founded. And moreover, they've kicked out the old guard, the first revolution, the scientific naturalists, and through DEI or DIE programs, they've marched from where they started this new virus of ideology in the humanities and social sciences, postmodern cultural Marxism, and they've jumped tracks into the other side of the university where math, medicine, and engineering are at. And so they've taken the entire universities and they've exported this into the corporate world, into media, into the churches, and so forth. And so that's part of the second revolution. And what I'm advocating now is no more menace of mindless Christianity. We need to follow Jesus and love God with our minds. And we need to think seriously, strategically about institutional recapture, not with pitchforks and torches, but we need to have our own little revolution, a Jesus revolution, but a consistently Christian Jesus revolution, where Jesus talked about the point to eternal life is this: the knowledge of God in John 17:3. Knowledge isn't peripheral to the Christian experience. It's
Right.
central. And Jesus was called in John's gospel the Logos, the logic of God. Logic itself, rationality itself, is grounded in God. And that's why we started the universities. And so this has implications downstream for culture, for families, for individuals, for civilizations. And so for the sake of civilization, for the sake of God, we just need to go back to being consistently Christian, like for the first 1900 years. And that is love God with our heads, not just with our hands and hearts.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now,
So
for
what
those taking notes at home, your first revolution was about a 50-year period in the 19th
Scientific
century,
naturalism from 1880 to 1930 at the universities. That's
1880,
where it started.
1930.
From campus to culture, but it came from Germany.
Okay, and the second one, are we just seeing the tail end of it? Or are we still in it? What's the time?
We
What's the
are
time frame?
in a cultural revolution as we speak. All of
And
the DEI stuff, it is not love your neighbor, diversity, inclusivity, include everybody, kumbaya, equality. No,
right,
it is
right,
diversity, which means recognize that everybody, whether they know it or not, whether they like it or not, are all part of social binaries that are juxtaposed in conflict theory against
okay,
one another, in
and
haves and have-nots, victim and victimizers, oppressor and oppressed, from race, class, sex, gender, ethnicity. And so the D is the social binary of human relationships. We're all part of these opposing groups: male, female, rich, poor, cisgender, transgender, homo, hetero, etc. And you need to now identify those and pick out the ones that are the oppressed. And when it comes to inclusivity, include them in the new voices because they have special soteric knowledge and they
right,
have moral authority. And then that's the inclusivity. And then the equity is revenge, payback,
right,
reparations.
right,
And this is where you coercively redistribute the wealth,
hmm
not of money anymore, but of social capital, especially the universities. And that's why, like at Harvard, even though politically right now, Harvard got the smackdown from the Supreme Court for racist admissions hiring. And they said, okay, we won't do that anymore. We'll find a
wow,
different way to do it.
yeah,
And
right,
then
right, right,
all the DEI programs are seemingly in retreat because they want money, federal money,
right.
but it's lipstick on a pig. Harvard
now,
had 100 DEI political officers, commissars. They didn't stop working 40 plus hours a week. I guarantee you, they're still there. And the professors there didn't have a come to Jesus moment. They're still there. And so we need an infiltration into these institutions as well.
my awareness of the themes you cited in this second revolution begins roughly 2008. When would you put the beginning of it, the second revolution?
Well, the crest of the wave began from 1995 when you're talking about a ratio of 2.3 to 1, liberal to conservative.
Okay,
Now, in the 2020s, it's 12 to 1 for those who are retiring. It's 23 to 1 for those who just got tenure and who will be with us for the next 30 or 40 years. And it's 20 to 27 to 1 at the Ivy Leagues. And in some departments like religious studies, it's 70 to 1. And some entire college campuses do not have a single registered Republican. So this is it's political on top, But the politics is always downstream from culture. Politics is part of
Yeah.
ethics,
Yeah.
which comes from epistemology, which comes from metaphysics. Your views of reality is scientific naturalism, but the poor naturalists got kicked out because the Marxists had something better. Darwin can tell us about our past, but Marx gave us a vision for our future. They won the day. They are the new kings on campus. And poor Richard Dawkins, this is why Dawkins now wants to call himself a cultural Christian,
Right.
and he wants to make amends, make up, and join an alliance now because he's sick of the Islamism in culture that Europe is seeing they're getting taken over by. And he's sick of the Marxism in culture. Why? Because he basically lost his Humanist of the Year award after the whole American Humanist Association went woke, and they took it away from him after 25 years. Why? Because he dared on X create a tweet that said, if a man can pretend to be a man trapped in a woman's body, why cannot Rachel Dolezal
Right.
claim to be a black person trapped in a white person's body? Discuss. He's got a point, but you know what? He's white, and he said the wrong
Male. He's male.
because he smacked the trans beehive, and you don't do that. Not in this particular revolution. Now we can see, because the LGB has gotten upset with the trans, including people like J.K. Rowling and others, you get the hashtag on Twitter, on X, which is LGB drop the T. Hashtag LGB drop the T. That's not by conservative Christians. That's by members of the LGB community.
I need to barge in for a moment. For the average person in the pew, my neighbor down the street here, because everything you're saying is important. This is at high level education where a lot of this is coming from. But I often explain to those I'm speaking to in churches that most of us have our worldview shaped by osmosis. It drifts into our brain from those around us, the sources that we come in contact with. University professors, television newscasters, books we read, videos we watch. We imbibe on that. It shapes our worldview. We don't have a filter to check it. And suddenly we start believing things that we don't know where it came from. And we are buying into the cultural zeitgeist as a result of that. So, how does taking over or not taking over, entering the university, at least on an equal footing with what's going on, start correcting that? By the way, we do have a question I'll put up here, but because you didn't.
Sure.
Did Dr. Miller fail to mention the contribution of Wilhelm Reich?
Well, he might follow up on that a little bit and say what that is, because no, I did fail to mention any contribution there. There's a lot of players that are involved in this whole thing. But I think when we're talking about how does the average person respond?
Right.
Well, first of all, so my forthcoming book on the Progressive Miseducation of America, it's not primarily political, though it may sound like that. It's talking about the progressive ideology, part of the new left, not the liberal left, but the illiberal left, the Marxist left, but that comes from originally the liberal left and from naturalism. The progressive miseducation of America, how this has been happening for over 100 years now, but we're only seeing a radical revolution happening before our eyes right now, because this is completely foreign. It's not Democrat and Republican anymore, conservative or liberal. This is a foreign ideology that has infiltrated first our universities. That's where it all begins, on the campus. And then it moves out into culture, into the corporate world, into the churches, into media, into, everything, all flora and fauna. And so in this book, I give the history of how this happened and what to do about it. Most people are not called to go to the university, and that's fine. But everybody, all hands on deck, from campus to culture, everybody needs to pay attention to the poisonous ideology coming from the universities, from upstream to downstream, because you can't go into your closets anymore. You can't go in. It's coming into your homes. It's coming into your churches. It's coming into your businesses. And you wonder where this came from. The answer is not politics to get rid of it. Politics is downstream. This is all coming from the campus, and our future legislators and professors and K through 12 educators are all coming from the universities. 1/3 of world leaders, prime ministers, presidents, dictators get an academic degree from a U.S. university. That is the battlefield, the university. And so pastors need to start thinking more about Christian thought than skinny jeans and fog machines.
I love that.
You know,
I gotta write that down.
seriously, I put it in my book. You can quote there.
Yeah,
Well, and here's the cover, and there's a link in the description, and it's coming out October 14, if I recall.
Yeah, it's already on Amazon for pre-order today, but that's right. It's coming out, and people need to read this. I address pastors, parents, parachurches, philanthropists and donors, political allies, prayers, all hands on deck. It's the university. Even if most aren't going to go there, everybody has kids, grandkids, businesses. This is where this is coming from. You need to be aware in order to beware of false philosophy, as Paul said.
Right. And what many well-meaning parents don't realize is, okay, I'm not going to be sending my child to the university, so I'm pretty safe. Except that if they go to public school, they're going to get it because their teachers were educated in the university. So you have this downstream marketing system by those who've been educated there.
now,
That's right. It's not just the public schools, it's the private schools. Your Christian school teacher
right.
would have been educated. And when you're talking about, say, Paulo Freire, the probably fourth most cited author in all of the social sciences,
Right.
linking again, he's a Brazilian Marxist.
Yep.
And he is the absolute central figure in the colleges of education, K through 12. So all of our schools are Freirean schools. Even if you're sending your kids to a K through 12, I see this stuff happening there. I see my daughter's syllabi as an elementary ed major at Purdue University in the Midwest that's focused on heavily on engineering, where bridges still have to stay up and 2 + 2 still equals 4.
Right.
And if it's happening there, it's certainly happening at Berkeley. But I'm talking Calvin College, Wheaton College, Biola University.
Yeah.
I'm talking Campus Crusade for Christ, Veritas Forum. You name it. The barbarians are no longer at the gates. They're in the citadels. And there are very few places, even in the Christian subcultural world, that have not been somehow tainted by this. And I can bring the receipts to show that.
It kind of underlined, I mean, Pablo Freire wrote The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. I mean, if that isn't a programmatic title.
He wrote the foreword to James Cone's book, Liberation Theology, the father of Black liberation theology.
Yeah.
And James Cone was the pastor of of Reverend Wright, Obama's pastor for 20 years.
Right.
And he was also the mentor of Raphael Warnock, Reverend Raphael Warnock, who took over MLK's pulpit and is now the senator of Georgia, who gave the eulogy at James Cone's funeral. This stuff is infiltrated into the churches, into the politics at the highest levels, and your Christian schools are not immune, and they have been infiltrated.
I heard James Cone speak in a chapel at Northern Seminary in the late 80s.
Interesting.
They were very, they considered themselves moderate evangelicals. It was funny. There were some, and they were recruiting a lot of Hispanic students from Latin America. The thing is, it caused tension on campus because a lot of the students they recruited were far more conservative than the seminary itself. And a lot of international students came there thinking they were getting one thing and got another. One time, one of them came and said to me, "Yeah, we have a professor who is the head of the Hispanic, department, the Hispanic program they called it, who invokes the name of Lenin and Marx alongside the name of Jesus in his prayers." And this was this was around 1990, late 80s, early 90s. I could give you the names, but anyways.
Look, I was at Yale University not long ago, and I actually went by the office of this author. She's a systematic theologian in Yale Divinity School, talking about queering God and queering Christianity. This is the Yale students and what they're learning and taking into the pulpit. This is at the Divinity School, right? And what she says in here is, I'm teaching my students, we're not going to be reading theology books. We're going to be reading studies on queer theory, critical queer theory, which is Marxist queer theory.
Right.
You go down the road to University of Pennsylvania, where the president recently had to resign because she couldn't say that genocide was absolutely wrong against the Jewish people. She's got a book out called Abolish the Family. Remember, Marx said you can sum up socialism in the Communist Manifesto,
Right.
Abolish private property. And we've learned in the last 5 years that private property, the new cachet there is whiteness. So abolish whiteness. Well, Marx was always about abolishing the family as well, a manifesto for care and liberation. She's a Marxist professor at University of Pennsylvania going after the family. This is not just theoretically. They're going after your kids. And to make it more about this again, how about the queering of the American child? So if you're a parent and you're looking at this and you're just thinking, oh, that's just for academic eggheads.
We had an ordained minister.
We're here and we're coming for your children.
Right. We had an ordained minister. They don't only sneak into academia, they sneak into churches. It happened in my church. An ordained minister. He was not from the PCA, our denomination. He was from the EPC. But he was friends with the senior pastor. He got hired as an assistant, and I kept hearing him talk about Pablo Freire, and he loved that guy. And he kept on recommending that I read, Che Guevara's Motorcycle Diaries. And one day I walked in. It was the weekend, thankfully. He was at the photocopier in the office, and he was wearing a Che Guevara T-shirt. And I just couldn't. I didn't even say anything. The man's gone home to be with the Lord, I assume. But he was thoroughly, and he to me, it was the bad faith it represented for him to not disclose these positions. We're one of the reddest parts of Florida. There was just no way he was going to get hired if he told us these things. He waited. I mean, I think our pastor might have known, but they were chummy. And our pastor's he was actually from South Africa. And I just don't think he took it as seriously as he should have. But in any case, and he'd been a missions professor in his other career. Imagine how many lives he influenced in that direction.
Yeah. So there's a couple of we're getting to the wrap up stage here. One is you were talking about how far left the current liberals are gone. They're really not liberals any longer. And I think of Alan Dershowitz, who's like old-fashioned liberal. We wouldn't agree on very much, but we would have a great time over lunch not agreeing on stuff.
Not a Marxist, you're saying? Just
he's not a Marxist. He's definitely not a Marxist.
Okay.
And he would disagree, but he would affirm that you have a right to believe what you want to believe and be wrong. That's okay.
And have private property.
and had private property, and you can buy lunch for both of us. How about that?
Look, all of these traditional liberals like Elon Musk, who voted for Obama and Biden,
Right,
he bought at a loss initially Twitter for keeping free thinking alive. That used to be the liberal thing.
right.
RFK, Tulsi Gabbard were Democrat presidential candidates in this recent cycle, and they're now in the Republican cabinet.
Right.
You have all of this, Joe Rogan, Peter Boghossian, and others that might be atheist, might be
Okay.
agnostic, might
So,
be
so, so
transhumanist.
for the viewer, who is Peter Boghossian? I know who he is. Who is
Used
Peter
to be.
Boghossian?
An atheist philosopher who wrote the book A Manual for Creating Atheists. But he and I joined forces and did a lecture tour at universities on viewpoint diversity, the death of intellectual diversity in the universities. I'm a conservative Christian. He's a liberal atheist. We have more in common than the illiberal Marxists that have infiltrated. That
Right.
tells you what's going on and how radical this new revolution is.
And now what's it doing to the conservative movement? To me is very intriguing. Is it moving toward the center? Are we seeing some kind of homogenization as we see all these?
So liberals didn't see what was happening very quickly, and many of them just got conscripted along the way, just like the German tanks. They rolled through, conquered other countries, and then put the German uniform on them and went to Moscow, right? In the same way, a lot within liberalism have been conscripted. Many of them are fighting back within, say, the Democratic Party. Others have said, you know what, this is too far gone. I'm going over to the Republican Party, which is now a big tent where we have
Right.
Bruce Jenner, who ran for the Republican presidency with the backing of the RNC for the governor of California, and thinks that this trans stuff in sports has gone crazy. What? You started all of this. And so now what's happened within, say, the Republican Party, this is just politics, which is downstream, much farther downstream than the source of this. You're seeing now the conservatives that still have a voice, the opportunity to be salt and light at the table in, say, the Republican Party. We're not identifying that party as Christian or even conservative per se, but it is where most conservatives go. It is where most Christians go because they're trying to conserve things connected to a Christian worldview. Now, because the tent has swelled, the conservatives have a smaller slice of influence, you might say, because there are far more people within that party. So when the next primaries come up, you're going to see that's going to be a really interesting situation. You've got conservatives and liberals, Christians and atheists, cisgender and transgender, all in the same party now. This is a revolution we're living in right now. And just as FDR and Churchill looked at Stalin and said, we need to have an alliance until this small mustache guy is gone. That's what's going on right now in our culture. That's what people don't understand.
So what happens when it does? Our version of the small mustache guy today is the
It's
the
Marx.
radical woke Marxist, culture, whatever. What happens if, they sometimes it looks like they're landing on the ropes sometimes, but we don't know. They're losing skirmishes right now. Are they losing major battles? I don't know. Will they lose the war eventually?
I think, Ron, Marx, even though he wrote about the US and what was happening over here, I don't think he ever really dreamed that this would happen. But if America is taken in this present revolution, this will be the most successful Marxist revolution in human history, without doubt, without firing a gun. Because America is the most influential flagship country. Yeah. And right now, it's still the predominantly influenced Christian country. So if they can take this and if they can ensconce themselves as they've been doing in the churches, the seminaries, the Christian academic societies, and so forth, this is going to be a very, very different world. So the chapter is not written. We are not out of the revolution. We are in the revolution as we speak.
He believed that the revolution, his revolution, would begin in the most industrialized nations. Instead, they began in some of the least industrialized nations. So if like taking your thread here and pulling on it a little bit, let's say it finally happens where the most industrialized nation, votes for a Marxist revolution the way he thought it would. The reason he thought it would start in these highly industrialized places is because he thought that's where the most oppressed people were. The irony is we have the least oppressed people here, but we've convinced so many of them that they're oppressed.
We have the least oppressed only under a certain perception. We are oppressed by whiteness, by the patriarchy,
right.
by Christianity, right?
That's how they have reshaped the discourse.
That's right. And so their new discourses are to change the language and to co-opt our words. Love is love. Justice is social justice. Now it's just called justice. And as Marx taught, when we think about Marxism, we think communism, we think economics. He said economic criticism is down the stream. That's tertiary criticism. Secondary criticism is political criticism. Primary criticism, where it all begins, is religious criticism. Right. This is the brilliance of Antonio Gramsci, who never got out of prison, but his works got translated into the US in Indiana at Notre Dame by a Marxist professor, is that the neo-Marxism needs to see the cultural aspect. Old Marxism, you could do the frontal assault. Russia was ready for it. China was ready for it. Why the West was not ready for it is because the West had this like castle moat scenario going on that every time you lobbed a shell, it's like a cell that starts to regenerate itself and rebuild. Unless and until this soft tissue of culture, what Gramsci called civil society, as opposed to political society, military and government and law enforcement, until we arrest civil society and ensconce ourselves in the soft tissue, beginning with academia and media and ecclesia, church, we will never have a successful Marxist revolution in the West. So we have to do cultural Marxism, and those who study apologetics, who are doing apologetics without understanding what cultural Marxism is, you may as well be speaking to the Jews in the synagogue, even though you're standing on Mars Hill talking to the Greeks. That ship has sailed. We are in a different world right now in America, and you can't do cultural apologetics if you don't know what cultural Marxism is. It began with naturalism, but those scientific naturalisms, they're out now. They're out. That was the first revolution.
So before we go, we're running a few minutes over. What I'm going to suggest is, number one, we're not saying give up the ship, it's all over. Now that you're totally depressed about what's going on, because it isn't all over. In the first century, the believers had to stand up against a pagan culture that didn't like Christianity. And what they did was discipled their people. The churches were embassies. Paul says we are ambassadors for Christ. And they worked in two areas. They worked at the education level, as you pointed out. Paul taught at the School of Irenaeus, and he challenged the intellectual elites of their day. They also worked in the neighborhoods, just reaching the lost, training the lost, caring for the lost as they became to the faith. Culture didn't change because they set out to change culture. Culture changed because people came to the faith and transformed their lives.
So you want to put Dr. Miller's book up there again? I'm looking forward to it. We can pre-order this thing.
I would like to, but I just put it away.
Well, okay, I'm sorry. It's the Progressive Miseducation of America, Confronting the Cultural Revolution from the Classroom to Your Community. I'm looking forward to snagging a copy. Can you get it on discount before it's released in October? I mean,
The
if you pre,
deal Amazon is giving now, they do on some books, they are on mine. Whatever the lowest price is between now and publication day, you will be guaranteed that price. And I
okay,
just finished doing audiobook in Chicago, so it will be on audiobook. It's already on Kindle and
Right.
paperback.
the
And we have the link in the description. You can go click on the link and go right over there and order one.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for coming. This is quite a whirlwind of information.
It is.
I have a
All
feeling
right.
we barely scratched the surface.
Corey, why should everyone think about coming to the conference August 15 and 16?
Other than you're going to be there,
Yeah.
Well, that goes without saying. I mean, come on, right?
look, this conference is about ideas. Ideas. World War II is not about weapons. It was about ideas, using weapons as instruments. Ideas have consequences, and bad ones have victims. Good ones can change lives for human flourishing and create good human civilization. That's what we're going to be talking about there.
Good. Ron, would you do us the courtesy of waltzing us out of here? How about that?
Okay, let's do it in 3/4 time. Give credit to whom credit is due. Our resident
Where
cult
is it?
leader profiler is Neil before me. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. Our wardrobe manager is See How It Fits You. Culinary services come from Chef Ham and Cheese. Our tinfoil hat provisioner is Just In Case. Jehovah's Witnesses coverage comes from Armageddon and The Opposer. Our Mormon Archives manager is Polly Gomez. Our Liberal Denominations Bureau Chief is Lucy Gooseby. Transgender issues coverage comes from Ben Hur. Our special correspondent for cults based on the Hindenburg disaster and flying turkeys, Ode to Humanity. Our fact-checking supervisor is Oleg Pulling. Technical assistance comes from Murky Research. Our legal advisors are at the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham & Howe. Our grievance resolution director is Giovanna Pisami. Our director of privacy assurance is Wyatt Tapping. And original idea sourcing comes from Drew A. Blank. The Unknown Webcast is a production of Midwest Christian Outreach in cooperation with Emergency Manicure Productions, both of whom are solely responsible for this content, although you will never be able to prove that in a court of law.
Never happened.
It looked like you were bending over and squinting at the screen, looking to see if you could see it. What was going on there?
Well, I all I saw was black, and I went, "Uh-oh, where's his thing at?" And then I saw it scrolling up. So,
Okay, I was thinking, okay.
no, you
Well,
were
we
perfectly
fixed that.
fine. So, all right, so we're gonna end the stream for all those out there in case we want to kibitz some more. Bye.
In a beat.